grandma, great-grandmother lives next door. Her brothers and sisters and cousins all live in the same house. And I called it Open House. And the protagonist, the lead character in the story, is named Opal. So, by the time Opal was a 7-year-old third grader, she knew without a doubt that her name was all wrong. On one typical Friday at school, Opal's in class and she's about to take a weekly spelling test. Teacher tells the students to take out a blank sheet of paper and write their names on the top. Opal loves spelling. Like her mother, she was unusually bright. She loved school in general. She played school for fun. She scored 100% on spelling tests effortlessly, week after week. And she was reading years above her grade level. So she was easily bored, became fidgety, and while other students were still getting out paper and pencil for the spelling test, Opal already had her paper and she was tapping her toes and her pencil in anticipation of the first word. She noticed her friend Mark wrote a different last name on this paper than the one she knew him by. She liked Mark. He was a good friend to her. He never chased her or other girls, and he never tried to fight her. So he just played baseball. In her world, that made him her friend. So she was confident and bold enough to lean over his desk and say, "That's not your last name." But Mark just calmly said, "I got adopted. I live with my grandmother now, so I got my last name changed." Shocked, Opal looked in Mark's eyes and earnestly said, "You don't have your daddy's last name either?" Besides herself, Opal didn't know anyone who didn't have their dad's last name. Mark answered, "Well, I have 2 last names, my dad's name and my grandma's. I just want to write my real last name today." Opal was stunned and enlightened at the same time, and bells started going off in her young mind. Kids can change their last names? I live with my grandmother too. Opal poured out her story to her trusted friend in that easy way that only young children know how to do with each other. "My name ain't supposed to be Daniels. My daddy's name is George Mays, and my mama's name is Ruthie Sutton. Neither one of them gave me their names. And I'm named after my great auntie Opal Pearl, but my mother named me Opal Heaven. But I live with my grandmother's name, Coffee and Merriweather, so those are supposed to be my names too, right?" Opal asked Mark, and he nodded like, "Yeah, I think that's how it goes." And she says, "I'm going to ask the teacher if I can write my real daddy's name too." Mark squinted his face in surprise and asked Opal, "Yeah, you don't have to ask anybody to use your real name. It's yours." Then he added, "I didn't ask to use my real name. I'm just using it." Opal said, "Oh, okay, me too." And with her newfound confidence, she said, "I'm not asking nobody to use my real name either. It's mine. Don't nobody else ask to use their real name." So she wrote her name as she deemed it correctly across the entire top line of the paper. She showed Mark, and he smiled and shrugged and nodded his approval, and beaming with pride, Opal turned in her spelling test. She was confident she'd get it back 100% scrawled across the top of it with a star or a smiley face, right next to where she proudly wrote for the first time her real name as she saw it: Opal Pearl Heaven Sutton Daniels Mays Merriweather Coffee. And that's how she began writing her name on her schoolwork. All of it, or any version of it. That's what she considered to be her real name. That lasted up until open house, back to school night. Opal was so happy for back to school night because her mom, Ruthie, was always so proud of her children whenever she went to school, because everybody knew that she should have been proud. She had the smartest kids in school, and they all received excellent grades. And she had just left Opal's brother's, Jerome's class, and she had seen his work and received an update from his teacher, and she happily strutted through the halls of the elementary school and went into Opal's classroom. Opal and her mother and her grandmother. Nobody could believe that her grandmother was a grandmother of 5 students at that school because she looked so young. So it was a proud Ruthie and her pretty mama who walked into Mrs. Cap's 3rd grade classroom with Opal, her brother Jerome, and her sister Karen. Opal gave her brother and sister a tour of the classroom, starting with her desk and on to the pet class hamster. The 3rd grade teacher spoke highly of Opal as a student and talked about her math and her reading and her science and her art were all above grade level. But when Miss Cap started thumbing through Opal's assignments, she spoke and she said, "Her grades are excellent, but I don't understand what she's doing with her name. Maybe you can tell me." She changes the order of the names, but she's writing all these names down. She gives different reasons why. Sometimes she says she's adopted by her grandparents. Other times she says she's using her real daddy's name. I was hoping you could explain, and without realizing she's done it, Ruthie, Opal's mom, snatched a stack of spelling papers from the teacher's hand, and her mother were just standing there in shock as they thumbed through the stack of papers. They looked at the scores of 100% on each and every test, but only after reading through the string of names scrawled across the top entire line of each test. Mama was the first to break the silence. When Ruthie, she said, she's writing me and Mama's names too. Then her teacher, she says, she's not adopted. She stays with me and my mother while her mother's at work, and she's adding our names and some other relatives, and that's not her name. Reassuringly, her mother says, oh, she knows better. She knows that's not her name. Don't worry about it. We'll talk to her and we'll put a stop to this. So just to give a little excerpt about some of the identity issues kids go through when they're not named correctly. So that's the unnamed. Next up, I'm going to call up Serena Toxicat to give us another excerpt from her reading.
That was really cool. Very nice. Thank you, Elva. It's actually kind of synchronistic too, because I just met my birth family. I went to Canada to meet them. And it took me over 10 years to locate them after finding their names. So just because you find their names doesn't mean you're going to find them. You have to be very persistent. And they accepted me, which you just don't know. So I was very fortunate. Okay. This is called Psychotic Coffee Break. For some reason, I forgot. We'll find out. The discarnates were still plodding away, knights in vehicles with pentacles for wheels. Vanilla Glitter liked to tease Harmony about his hair, which stuck up like a stalk of broccoli in a high ponytail. Pretty soon, she had the whole band calling him Broccoli Head and chiding him with Rooster Face because of the shape his lips made during the long stretches of highway hypnosis. Vanilla Glitter noticed that as long as Evangeline was moving, she was happy, and everyone knew that inertia was the tribe's greatest nemesis. Having enough money for starch sandwiches from fast food chains that littered the highway exits was a sign of prosperity. Vegetarian discarnates relished the abundance of meatless whoppers stuffed with fries, while the omnivorous celebrated their culinary diversity. Evangeline wondered how certain scientists ate dessert. When sharing a crisp, sugary crusted apple tart or a dense fudge brownie with a good Cartesian friend, how do they settle on who gets the bigger half? By definition, a mathematical impossibility. Tell me when I should stop, okay? Because I know we have 7 minutes now. Truck stops and gas station shops looked like amusement parks of commerce after days in motion, when the grays and greens of the freeway borders whirred into a unified blur. Joints stiff, butts sore, the gang would file into the rest stops with all the wonder of birthday boys and girls ogling the tacky Americana. The stares, snickers, and yanking away of children were tiring, horripilating, or hilarious, depending on the mood of the moment. If they had a gallon of gas for every mention of Halloween, interviews with vampires, and Marilyn Manson, the band would stay roadbound till death claimed its rubbery soul. Bitterfly shopped for cock rock tapes at checkout counters. They were cheap and cheesy and satisfied his yearning for the sounds of his childhood. Evangeline picked up a t-shirt in Texas with the words, "Property of Jesus Christ," prison stamped upon it, which she wore with her camouflage pants. In Arizona, she bought a canned Puma plush toy, and en route to El Paso, adopted a calico snake. This angered Luna, who claimed that the cat girl was squandering band finances. Sparky cackled about fruit bats upon crossing the threshold of any truck stop. The tradition started in a gift shop with a picture book of animals. There was the furry flying thing staring at the moon or maybe at some trees. And Sparky, inspired to pronounce fruit with an inward squeal, then bat on the exhale, flapped his arms in the parody of flight. He and Evangeline took the game into BB the van and exhausted hours in its execution, annoying their bandmates to tears of frustration. In San Francisco, Evangeline bought half-price Easter candy and discerned a certain genius in sticking a squashed peanut butter cup in an Aliens action figure package. She'd scrutinized the modern art mishap with a single eye, puffing laughter so bloated it silenced itself and doubled her onto the driver's seat from the bench behind. Harmony scowled until curiosity got the best of him and stole a peek at the plastic window. Seized by the spectacle, he commenced a giggle fest comparable to Vanjie's own hee-hawing. Vanilla Glitter folded her arms and frowned, but their howling and snorting persisted into the evening, resurfacing at intervals throughout weeks to come. And I'm going to stop the silliness here because it could go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was good. Okay, so next I'm going to bring Samiko and Carolyn. She's going to talk about a book that her and her mom actually co-wrote, and I'll let her tell you more details about it.
Okay, so just introduce me. So yeah, actually my mom's gonna read because it's a comic book that my mom wrote and I illustrated it. So she's the one who wrote it. So I'm gonna.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Salson, and the title of this comic book is Living a Lie, and this is from the first episode. His hair was short cropped and brown. He managed to look like an upwardly mobile 30 to 35-year-old Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But who was he really? Not who was he pretending to be. He had been in jail. He'd come from the wrong side of the tracks in a town in Northern California so small and of such ill repute that it seemed ridiculous to have a bad side of town. What did she say? Let's meet at which restaurant tonight? Things are getting too serious. Oh well, he thought. It's another Monday and I need to be at work on time. So he uncurled his long, thin, pale body from around a pillow and sat up abruptly. He looked over at his old-fashioned alarm clock and noticed that it was about to go off and sighed. Time to get into gear. He went to his closet and took out a very conservative gray three-piece suit, after which he selected an also conservative tie to match. After gathering his necessities for faking the image he was trying to perpetrate, he took a bath. His eyesight was nearly perfect, but he preferred the way he looked in glasses, and he wore some sharp, expensive brand that he thought made him look more subtle or intelligent. Lately, he'd been going by the name Randolph James, of course. That wasn't his real name, but he made it work. Looking into the full-length mirror in his bedroom, he forced his body to stand